I am Jim Collison and live from the Gallup campus here in Omaha, Nebraska. This is Gallup Strengths Spotlight, recorded on December 19th, 2014. Strengths Spotlights are live interviews that Gallup conducts with individuals, teams, or organizations who are using the Clifton StrengthsFinder and its 34 themes to impact their community and organizations around the world. If you have questions, please email those to us. Just send us an email, coaching@gallup.com. And don't forget to visit the Gallup Strengths Center. That's just all one word, gallupstrengthscenter.com, for all your StrengthsFinder resources and training needs. Although I think today we'll find out another website you can go to as well for that. You can also catch the video and both streaming and now downloadable audio for offline listening to all our Gallup webcasts, and we do have many of them. They're all available on the main page at coaching.gallup.com. Today I have with me Mark Pogue. Mark's a Senior Director of Strengths Education here at Gallup. And Mark, it's great to have you on the program, and welcome to this Gallup Strengths Spotlight.
Oh, thanks very much, Jim. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's good to have you because I was mentioning early, just before we got on, I do a lot of recruiting for Gallup, and we're in college campuses kind of around the country, and we get some questions around this StrengthsQuest product that we have. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of folks that I've run into by doing Call to Coach and Theme Thursday. They know StrengthsFinder 2.0. Some of them have heard about StrengthsQuest. Others are StrengthsQuest only. That's how they entered into the Strengths movement. Mm-hmm. And so I thought it would be great to pull you on and say, hey, Mark, let's chat a little bit about StrengthsQuest. So the goal today is to work through it and get some questions answered, maybe some myths busted, maybe some new ideas of things we wanted to talk about, get it recorded, and so that we'd have it. So, Mark, thanks for coming on. Let's talk a little bit about you, a little focus on you, kind of who you are, what you do, those kinds of things as we get started.
Well, I'm the StrengthsQuest guy. I've been working almost exclusively with StrengthsQuest inside our education division for, full-time since probably the second half of 2002, maybe peeking into 2003. I had originally joined Gallup to work with our education division and had come out of a career in working with high school students and college students in a Christian ministry, but primarily working with students during that entire time. So it was kind of a natural transition to work with our education division, and then even more so when I was invited to be a part of a group of folks, just a small team that Tom Rath put together to investigate the possibilities of actually putting together a program specifically for students with a foundation around StrengthsFinder. StrengthsFinder had only been out about a year. I think we had just published Now Discover Your Strengths fairly recently, and when this conversation got started. And Don had always had a desire. Don Clifton had always had a desire to have a specific offering for students to address specifically the needs of students in an academic setting around their strengths. And Tom picked up on that project early on, and fortunately I must have been walking down the right hallway, and he invited me to be a part of that team. And so what happened was we had a gentleman by the name of Chip Anderson, Dr. Chip Anderson, and he was a good friend of Don's. Actually, if you've taken the time to read the foreword in StrengthsQuest, you'll see where how that relationship manifested itself. Basically, Chip went to a conference that Don was asked to keynote at, and it just basically rocked Chip's world. Chip had been a committed educator working with students at UCLA, and primarily working with students that were at risk and in programs to help them be successful academically, and so they were coming from a variety of situations that might have put them in a position where they were less likely to succeed, and Chip was in charge of those students. And his main approach to their development, his main approach to kind of fixing their problem was a remediation strategy. It was figure out what you're not good at, and then we're going to remediate that out of you. We're going to fix you. And Don obviously stood up in front of this crowd of educators and began to dispel the myth of remediation as the most successful way to bring a person around to success. And I think that was the key for Chip and for most of us, that as we became enamored with a strengths philosophy, it wasn't necessarily about the fact that remediation doesn't work. It works really effectively in some situations. And I like to joke that it just means that you'll suck less. And certainly you're not, so there is improvement there. You can't say that there's not improvement. In fact, there might be vast improvement for you to be sucking less. But you're never going to get to excellence. You're never going to have an opportunity to be great at something. And it was one of those things that Don always talked about. I think, especially as he thought about our education group and all the work that we do around teacher selection and getting great teachers in classrooms and all the methods by which we have to affect a student's opportunity to be successful. One of the things that he said was that every student ought to be able to get an A in something. And and I agree with him that everybody has strengths that could be built upon and developed in a way that it will allow a student to figure out where their potential lies. And it's going to be different for all of us. And so with that, Chip really did an about-face and began to, first had a very, I think almost a spiritual, consideration of what he had heard, and really began to shift the way he thought about student development. And so as a part of this project with Tom and the team that we had to put together basically a website and a set of tools and some approaches that we could make accessible to educators, we also encouraged Chip and Don to write a book together, and that ended up being StrengthsQuest. And basically the two of them collaborated on thinking about strengths from a student's perspective, and it's pretty exclusively that. I would say that, when you look at the content of StrengthsQuest, again, much in the style of a number of Gallup books on strengths, the real wealth of the book probably lies in those action items specific to your 5 themes. And in fact, that's the bulk of the book as well. If you take a look at the percentage of pages that are committed to action items, you'll find that the book is primarily committed to, let's get to the real work of you applying your strengths in an academic setting and allowing you to have the opportunity to be successful on a college campus. So I think that was the thought.
The genesis of it. Let's talk a little bit about how it's different from StrengthsFinder 2.0. It's probably one of the biggest questions I get from the coaches is, so am I taking the same assessment? How is it the same? How is it different?
Yep. So there's obviously a book associated with both 2.0 and with StrengthsQuest. The real difference is that StrengthsQuest is a program. Think of it as a program designed to help students apply their strengths in an academic setting. StrengthsQuest relies on StrengthsFinder as its assessment. It's the very same assessment that you would experience in 2.0. And the very same report is generated. There's no difference in that. In fact, in both the reports that you're able to access on the StrengthsQuest website. So if you enter into the strengths world via StrengthsQuest, you'll have an access code much like you would if you had StrengthsFinder 2.0. And but once you go to a separate website, and once you've registered and you've taken the assessment, exactly the same assessment, no different than what you would experience on 2.0. What you'll get are you'll get a website then that is populated with information about you around your strengths specific to. There's 2 different reports that I think folks primarily access. One is the signature themes report. Most folks are familiar with the StrengthsQuest or familiar with the StrengthsFinder signature themes report from Now Discover Your Strengths. That was that first report. It was more generic. And then StrengthsFinder 2.0 provides the insight and action planning guide. So with StrengthsQuest, you get access to both of those reports. You can look at either the signature themes report, which is more generic, and then you can look at the insight report, which takes into consideration some additional research that we did, always researching, additional research that we did after we had probably a couple million completes on the StrengthsFinder site. So probably too much, but there's a way to define it. Is that anything that comes out of that?
I think that's a perfect explanation. We have had, how many have taken it through the StrengthsQuest site so far?
You know, I just checked our website. If you ever want to know, we've got a ticker on the StrengthsQuest site, and I just checked it. It's updated monthly. I think right now we have 2,038,910 respondents that have registered and taken StrengthsFinder through the StrengthsQuest website. You know, I know the numbers aren't exact, but that's about a fifth, I think, of our overall website, our overall completes on StrengthsFinder. If I'm right, we're right around 10 million or so. Is that correct, Jim?
Yeah, we just crossed over 11 million. So it took us
so
about a year, about a million a year, and now we're doing about a million every 7 months.
Yeah.
And so that is accelerating. I think we may see some acceleration on StrengthsQuest site as well. Just to be clear, then, you know, StrengthsFinder 2.0, the main site, GallupStrengthsCenter.com. We do have an additional strength site, which is just strengths.gallup.com, and some folks know that site as well. We're merging those two, or working on putting those together. And then the StrengthsQuest site, super easy, is just StrengthsQuest.com. And so, Mark, if I'm a coach or I'm interested in this, how do I know when to go to the Gallup Strengths Center to get my codes, and when to go to the StrengthsQuest to get my codes?
You know, I think primarily it's thinking about, you know, who the audience is. If you're working with a student, you know, and you can define that pretty loosely. I mean, I think it's not about age necessarily, except, you know, making sure that they're at least of high school age, you know, to take the instrument originally. But we've used StrengthsQuest as a program for student development in community colleges where primarily the student audience is not a traditional age student. You know, we're talking about folks that are mostly returning learners that are coming back. Maybe they're getting a certificate in a particular area, and but they've, you know, been in the world of work for maybe 20 years or longer. So it's really defining them not by age, but by you know, what primarily are they going to benefit from a strengths experience. And if it's in the context of them being a student, then StrengthsQuest.com is a great place to go, because the tools are aimed specifically at that. Those action items are going to be specific to you know, student and academic situations. So I define it that way.
And if I was an organization that was interested in getting involved in something like this, maybe at a bigger level, I mean, an individual, a teacher, a group leader could do this individually. What's the process? Kind of, how do people ferret that out to figure out what to do? That's always been a big question. How do they get in touch with us, or what's the best way to do that?
That's great. Well, you know, that again, you know, we've created some confusion for ourselves just because we've got multiple places you can go for development around strengths, and you know, so there might be some confusion around that, but on the upside, there are plenty of opportunities to find exactly what you need, whether it's on the Strengths Center site or going to straight to the coaching site and getting information about opportunities and certifications, etc. We do have specific classes on the StrengthsQuest site. So all you got to do, if you're an educator, you simply just need to go again to StrengthsQuest.com. At the top of the web page, there's you know, a series of links, and one of them is for Strengths Educator. Just click on that, and it will list out a number of opportunities. It'll give you a number of resources that are immediately available to you just right there on the website. So if you're looking for activities, PDF activities that you might want to print out and use with your students in some initial introduction of strengths to them, beyond just giving them a code and trying to start a conversation with that, which there's probably plenty plenty of smart educators, talented educators that could do that. But if you're needing some exercises to kind of get that conversation started, those are some of those resources that are available. There's some things on there that are more academic in nature, like we provide a link to a technical report. That's something that we might not get as many requests for on our coaching site, because folks are looking more at the utility of strengths as opposed to the hows and the whys and the whats. And but our educators are they're a bunch that likes to verify what they're using. They like to really dot the I's and cross the T's. And so we provided some additional resources for them just to help them understand the efficacy of the tool, the research behind StrengthsFinder itself, the instrument, and it also is probably useful in many instances for educators to have that information, simply to be able to answer questions of folks that have questions on their campus. So if you have somebody that's raising some concerns about whether or not this is an appropriate tool to be using with their students, that technical report can be a useful tool for that. And that's just one of many resources that we provide. One other that I'd mention is it's an extra long PDF. I certainly wouldn't hit print without really thinking very seriously about how many trees it's going to cost us. But there is a PDF in there that is called the StrengthsQuest Activities Workbook. It's probably got more than 200 pages in it. It has activities that are specific to kind of our basic developmental framework for strengths, where I think there's a bunch of different words that describe it right now. I heard Kurt Liesfeld referring to it as what was it? Name it, claim it, name it.
Claim it.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, exactly. And so there you go. Get it in that right order.
You got to get in the right order.
But those activities are actually organized in that format. And so if you're looking for an activity where you're just beginning to introduce strengths, there's a number of activities that fit under that category. It gives you instructions for how to set up the activity. It gives you a PDF if needed to print as a handout for students. And then it also gives you instructions on follow-up for that particular activity. And again, that's for at least 100 different activities. This was compiled by a team of educators several years ago. It's been 6 or 7 years ago that we created it. But I think it also points to the community that exists around StrengthsQuest. So as much as there is a community that is developing and becoming rich around the coaching aspect of strengths, there is a pretty long-standing community of educators that are committed to a strengths approach to education as well, especially in the higher ed area.
When we first started Call to Coach and Theme Thursday, I would used to Google resources. I get questions from the coaches all the time, and I'll be honest, most of the time I landed on the StrengthsQuest site. It is rich. I didn't realize how rich it is in content. I think it's maybe our best kept secret among our coaches that we focus on the Gallup Strengths Center, but you just mentioned tons of resources that are available to them, and some starter kits of things they could just. It's free for them to print. They could just go on some activity. Can you give me an idea, maybe your favorite activity in there, just kind of what somebody would look for in there?
Oh, let's see. I know this is just one of the basics, and it's one that I'm sure that any experienced coach has probably already come across in some other format, because it's not something original or specific to education. But I love that My Strengths and How I Use Them activity. It's a grid where you basically write your 5 themes down the left-hand side, and then I think there's 3 other columns. One is to create a short definition of your strength. The next is to really define, for yourself, how that strength manifests itself, and then you've got to give a specific example. And it's a great activity. I think it's best if you can assign it and allow folks to take it home and think about it a bit before they fill it out, and then bring it back for some discussion. But it can be done live in a classroom, and I've done it that way a number of times. I've done it that way 1,000 times. But I never get tired of it because I believe that it's an activity that covers some really important basics. It gets some things set pretty early in a person's experience around their strengths. First, if we expect people to remember their 5 themes, we need to make a concerted effort to have them focus on creating a definition that they can own. So when I say create a short definition of your themes, I'm not suggesting that they go to our short definitions. We have a little document. You can print it right off of the StrengthsQuest site. I'm sure the coaches have seen it as a resource as well, where we have maybe a 2-sentence description of a theme. And the reaction that I get from most people, because I test people on this, I'll say to them, okay, take one of the themes that you really own within your top 5 and read the short definition and tell me what you think. And typically the response back to me is, not so much. And it's because it does not have enough depth to explain that theme for that particular person. It doesn't take into consideration, again, the other themes. There's a lot of reasons that short definition falls short when a person is trying to apply it to themselves. It's very useful, I think, for somebody that, for instance, doesn't have context and wants to get a quick snapshot on context. But it does very little for somebody that has the theme reading it. So what I suggest is you go to, and this ends up being another activity, go to the insight definitions, or especially, or the signature theme definition, and spend some time highlighting the phrases that most resonate with you, and then build your own definition out of that. Gallup is not holding you to accepting every single word that we have penned specific to that particular theme. We tried to give you, because let's face it, you spent 35-40 minutes on the internet taking this assessment. There's no way that it could describe the breadth and depth of the way that you experience that particular theme. So make it your own. Spend some time to make that theme your own, and then out of that, pull one phrase that if somebody says that, your eyebrows go up, your energy level is peaked, because that's exactly how that theme works within you, and that is your short definition. It could be just a few words. I think we share Activator, and I always go to move to action quickly. I think that's what resonates most with me. I certainly resonate with move. I'm probably ADHD. If I were to have my themes diagnosed, I would probably be on medication for having Activator as opposed to thinking of it as a strength. So I think about that move to action. It just captures the sense of what Activator is to me. Everybody needs to have that. The other thing that I think is really important about that My Strengths exercise is the opportunity to think for a moment about a story that illustrates you using that theme recently. People own their themes when they get to that place where they can say, oh yeah, 2 days ago, I was at a restaurant and I just was, I just extended my friendship to my waitress. She ended up giving me a free beer, or I got a free dessert for her, from the wait staff, and that it's woo. Their woo theme got them something free. But I love it when somebody can tell me a story of how that theme benefited them. What is a specific benefit that you've had, and the more recent, the better. And it does fit in a lot with Gallup research around, identifying strengths. There is something to people being able to claim and actually see where that theme created a benefit for them in their recent history. If the best they can do is claim using that strength, or that strength being helpful 6 months ago, I want to have another conversation with them. But if somebody can tell me in the last 48 hours or even in the last 5 or 6 days a significant benefit of possessing that theme, then they walk away going, yeah, that's right. That does happen for me, and that is useful, and it is beneficial. And it's a starting point to build on to help a person begin to see those strengths playing themselves out on a daily basis.
So some of the exercise there takes a certain amount of maturity to be able to go through that. And I think the number 2 question I always get about StrengthsQuest, when we think about Strengths Explorer, StrengthsQuest, and then StrengthsFinder 2.0, is the age group and inappropriateness for age group, and do we set hard limits on age, and how does that work, and what's been the success that you've seen, at least as we with the target audience? Maybe talk a little bit about that and what your recommendations are for using that tool and who should get it.
Well, I mean, we know that the instrument, from Dawn's design, from the very beginning, was that it would be normed with, a wide range of ages. And so to that, there was a number of high school students, high school age students, that participated in a lot of that initial research and norming the instrument and making sure that it was appropriate for, students that, for instance, weren't necessarily high school graduates. I think also what that speaks to is that, and I'm sure you can look up this stat somewhere too, that I think StrengthsFinder, the instrument, doesn't exceed like a 6th grade reading level technically. Now, there have been issues around that. I mean, there's obviously students in high school that don't read at a 6th grade level, and but they're all clumped together, and you have a wide range of students that are at different reading levels. There's actually, I know of one example of a teacher that was up in St. Cloud, Minnesota, that just saw so much value in the language and the experience that even some of her students that struggled quite a bit academically could benefit from a strengths approach to their development. And then to that, she recognized that some of them probably didn't have the reading level that they needed, and she actually created a glossary. I don't know how she did it. I think she probably went through item by item, on the StrengthsFinder assessment and tried to spot words that she thought her students might struggle with. And so prior to them taking the assessment, they would actually have a vocabulary test. And I think that's the extreme, probably of trying to resolve that issue. Is it the appropriate thing to do? I don't know. I'm not the scientist that's going to be able to, really be able to discuss whether or not it's appropriate, in terms of a person that struggles with that 6th grade reading level. But it worked for her. I think it relieved a lot of the anxiety that some of the students had when they did hit a word that they didn't understand. And the last thing we'd ever want is an instrument named StrengthsFinder to make a person feel like they were inadequate in some way. And so I think, maybe more than anything, it gave students an opportunity to feel comfortable with it so that they didn't get stuck and not be able to at least finish the assessment and get a report just like all the other students in their class. So she did that. And so, we've seen plenty of examples of success in using StrengthsQuest. Obviously, that's a product that I work with primarily, but using the StrengthsFinder instrument with high school age students. Now, I would also say that StrengthsQuest is written to a college crowd. I mean, you take a look at the language, and we talk about. There's terminology in there that would really point towards somebody experiencing their education at the college level as opposed to the high school level. But I still think there's, you in the hands of a talented educator, I would say there's plenty of opportunities to use StrengthsQuest effectively with students and introducing high school students to their top 5.
That's good, and it is a little gray. I think we've got some definitive things we say, but really, as you're working, I mean, your staff, the kids you work with, and I say you, of the collective you of all of us, we probably know those things better than anybody else, and so a judgment call needs to be made there. Mark, who around the country, or what are some best examples, best practices of groups that are using this and using effectively, and why has it been effective for them? I guess that's the real question. What's been the ROI for them on that?
Good. Oh God, that's a great question, and it's a complicated one because there are just a number of answers, number of reasons that folks would choose to implement a strengths development strategy on their campus for their students, and I think that's been an evolution, Jim, because when we started. We went out there and basically we just said, "Hey, strengths," and there's a number of educators that took the assessment and they bought in and they said, yeah, strengths, and so they started doing things. And I think we're in a much better position now in terms of the impact that strengths actually has on students than we were in those early years, because we didn't really know why we had them doing it, other than this feels pretty good, and it feels like that that this is an appropriate way to develop. It doesn't, it causes no harm that we can see. Students really buy into it. So if I, as an instructor, use this in my classroom, all of a sudden I'm a little bit more popular as an instructor. Nothing wrong with that. It maybe opens up opportunities for us to have conversations and discussions around who that person is as an individual, who that student is as an individual, than I've ever had before. Not to say that StrengthsFinder, is an end-all, be-all, or that it's, the only assessment that any person ever needs to take. But it does do some things, some very specific things that, and it gets to those things in a fairly easy manner that might have been more difficult in the past. Just some of those conversations that can happen, especially one-on-one. So I think out of a number of years of people experimenting with it, educators that were committed to a strengths approach and thinking this is just intuitively an appropriate way for students to develop, some things started to come out. And some of it was a result of our research. We worked a little bit with Shane Lopez and trying to put together some ways to assess whether or not a strengths development strategy was actually an appropriate and effective way in helping students develop. And there's a available on our StrengthsQuest website. There's a document that's kind of it brings together a number of studies that have been done over the years, really researching the efficacy of a strengths development strategy in terms of the impact that it has on students. It's not a research paper, on whether or not context is really a theme. We're not having those conversations. Instead, we're having conversations and investigating whether or not, if a student finds out what their top 5 strengths are, if they have a specific level of intervention around those strengths, what happens to that student? What's more likely to be their experience on a college campus? And the question is always, does it impact retention? If a student goes through a strengths development program, are they more likely to stay? Well, maybe. It's just really, really difficult to nail down retention. But we did find out for sure that students that participate in a strengths development program, and so that means more than strengths identification, and I know you guys have addressed this over and over within the coaching realm, that it's not just about taking the assessment. If you take the assessment, that's fine. It's probably not going to hurt you, but you're probably not going to benefit a lot from that unless there is a specific strategy that you follow or somebody helps you through in terms of developing around those strengths. And so for those folks that, and for those programs that really employed StrengthsQuest, StrengthsFinder, within the context of a strengths development strategy. So they had multiple touches with strengths. They were invited to think about their strengths in a bunch of different settings. They might have, found out about their strengths in a first-year experience program, but then that was followed by their strengths actually being utilized in the context of a classroom. Perhaps they took an English course, and one of the assignments they had was to write about their 5 strengths in a particular context, or a speech communications course where they were to stand up in front of their class and talk 7 minutes about how a particular theme allowed them to have a particular success. Those types of developmental activities that follow up that introduction to strengths are the ones that we find really have an impact. And what they had an impact on were 2 things specifically: a student's hope and their engagement. And that in turn, we've seen both hope and engagement also impact a student's overall well-being. And if you start to start to follow all those arrows and see where everything crosses on that diagram that we've just created, where strengths leads to hope, leads to engagement, engagement and hope leading to higher levels of well-being, then we also see a bump in that academic piece as well. So what that told us was, don't just drop a code on somebody. And I say drop a code, I would say that probably 90% of the students that participate in StrengthsQuest do so without a hard copy book. The book is entirely available in HTML and PDF on the website, so you can certainly download it and read it in a physical manner. But almost every student out there participates in StrengthsQuest through an access code, just simply because of the volume of students going through on a particular campus. And one example that I'd give you you talk about best practice, one example I'd give you is the University of Minnesota. Been a great success for us, and they've been one of those that have followed down that path where initially they were enamored with the whole strengths philosophy. It was a scattered approach. There were a number of educators all across the University of Minnesota Twin Cities campus for a number of years, probably 6-7 years before it kind of coalesced and somebody took ownership of it and said, we really ought to try to take advantages of economies of scale here. And so what they did was they first tried to organize all those different groups, and in that they began to decipher why all these different organizations on campus were using strengths. And once they had kind of figured out, hey, this seems to be the common experience that people have, then they began to develop a strategy that was specific to the University of Minnesota. And it has developed into one that is really focused on student well-being. So what they want to do is they want to obviously affect the well-being of students on the campus, but what they're trying even more so to do is they're trying to help that student develop habits and strategies for managing their own well-being well beyond their college years. And with strengths as kind of that foundational language, it provides all kinds of ways for folks to think about well-being in terms of their own strengths in an academic setting, and managing their time and managing their relationships, all of those things on the college campus. But then with the real focus on, hey, we want to prepare these folks to go out and to be successful in the world. And go to the University of Minnesota site. In fact, if you want to do a search, you can do University of Minnesota, drop it into Google, University of Minnesota StrengthsFinder, and you'll come to a specific link that addresses everything that they're doing. Some of it's password protected, but there's also opportunities for you to send the folks there at the U a message just to say, I'm interested in this. Could you respond to me in terms of some of the research that they've done, et cetera? So it's a great resource.
Mark, there was a time where the University of Minnesota was getting so many requests for questions that we just sat down and we recorded an interview with them last winter, I think it was,
right.
About a year ago now, maybe a little less than that. And so
that was with Shane, wasn't it? I think was Shane hosting it, or
one of those like that as well. This one, Katie and their contact.
Robin.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And so about 45 minutes. So if you're interested, that's on our YouTube page. If you want to go over there, I think that Google search that you mentioned will bring up that video. If you go out there, if you have any questions, of course, you can always contact me here at Gallup, Jim_Collison at Gallup.com. Direct you to the video as well if you want to get a look at that. But from them talking about what they do and how they do it and how it interacts with the students. And so, Mark, we are engaged in a Purdue Index where we're asking a lot of questions about engagement. Have we, and from your side, have we thought, how does StrengthsQuest play into that index, and are there some data ties that come back to that when we think about strengths and StrengthsQuest?
Oh, I think so. I mean, there's every indication that, bottom line is strengths development is right in line with, kind of this broader movement around positive psychology. And everything that we're doing within the context of GPI, I think, again, fits right along with the themes and the intent of the positive psychology movement. So we're still trying to figure that out. I think, it's pretty easy to take a look at some of the findings from the Gallup Purdue Index and be able to see where strengths could play a very important role. Bottom line is, the first one is we're talking about, GPI. One of the big topics is about engagement. It is about what have you done. What does a student need to do during their experience on a college campus that could impact the level of engagement that they experience when they graduate and become employed. And so, there's a number of different, things that we spotted that correlate very nicely with higher levels of engagement. Well, what do we know about our engagement survey, which is one that measures more of an emotional engagement? One of the items that I think is one of the most predictive is, do you have the opportunity to do what you do best every day? And obviously that is directly linked to strengths development. That's the whole philosophy behind that question. It's where it came from, was Gallup's research and implementation of strengths development strategies that led to us having a discovery around the efficacy of the opportunity to do what you do best every day. So there's a perfectly valid researched link that we can explore even further around the results of the GPI. Incidentally, spoiler alert on this one, I'm actually working with a team. We're in the middle of a pretty concerted effort to look at the potential of actually creating, maybe you'd call it StrengthsQuest 2.0, but an additional book that actually does a very deep exploration of strengths development in the context of your education, specific to those results that came out of the Gallup Purdue Index. So nothing final on that yet, but we've got a team that's working on it, and we think it's so important because, the original StrengthsQuest book does a great job of addressing who you are as, your strengths in the context of who you are as a student. It does very little in terms of what comes after. Once you've graduated, what happens? And so what we want to do is we would love to be able to help students begin to think while they're in college, which is the time to be doing it, while they're in college, to be considering, well, if what I've discovered that, my strengths manifest themselves in a particular way and allow me to be successful in a particular situation, what's the transferability of that into the context of me in a different kind of role, maybe a job after I've graduated? And we want to help students begin to understand how to make that jump for themselves, figure out that transferability, figure out that my context strength in a pinch can be used as a great tool to meet people because I don't have woo in my top 5. How do I do that? And that would be something that, again, is transferable. It's not specifically tied to a particular situation. It's not one that's limited, but in fact has just unlimited application outside of the context of my academic life.
And if folks are looking for more information on that Gallup Purdue Index, of course, that's on our main page at Gallup.com. Right. So head to Gallup.com, look into the education section. One of the interesting findings for me, because I run our internship program here, is that we found that meaningful internships during those college years and meaningful relationships with someone who cared about me as a person while I was there. Mm-hmm. Did an educator, or was there someone who cared about my progress? I think is not the exact question, but pretty close. And oftentimes that relationship can happen in the course of this coaching or these strengths discussions, right? I mean, that's where you can really, a student can open up and a mentoring kind of coaching relationship can begin. Have you seen that kind of relationship happen around StrengthsQuest as well?
Oh, sure. Yeah, I believe that so many of our educators are attracted to just the philosophy that StrengthsFinder, StrengthsQuest embodies. Those types of educators are naturally attracted to this, and as a result of it, they gain some, they take some courses, they get a little bit of additional expertise, they learn the language, they take the time to learn the language, which is a pretty serious commitment with 34 themes in our instrument. But once they do that and they start to have those conversations, a lot of it has to depend on their talent and their ability to engage with a student. But with that tool in hand, we just see all kinds of great things that happen in the context of relationships between students and educators. So I think it's enhanced. I don't think it's something that didn't happen before, but I think there's a much better chance of it happening, especially when an educator is committed enough to a strengths approach to, for instance, have their top 5 themes posted on their door. And when a student walks by and says, hey, I just took that instrument and I have Activator 2, that starts a conversation that's very different than, hey, I see you're wearing red and I am wearing red, So I think there's opportunities there that, we're just beginning to see kind of manifest themselves. But we had, I'm trying to think, we've got over 2 million completes, obviously. I think it's probably around 250,000 students every year that take the assessment through StrengthsQuest on a college campus. So there's a lot of pockets out there, a lot of full-time programs that I'd say there's at least 60 or 70 schools out there that are committed to every incoming student taking the assessment and participating in a developmental program around their strengths. But there's also just a lot of little pockets where you have maybe one educator that sees the efficacy, they get enough training for themselves, and they begin to promote that within their locus of control.
Yeah, and so in the interest of time, we've got a lot of information here. Mark, I think I'll have you back on another one of these just so it's so you can consume it kind of in one sitting. We'll kind of wrap this here, but I got one kind of final question for you. I'll let individuals know if they do continue to have questions for us. You can send us, if you go to StrengthsQuest.com, there's a way to send some questions in. The best way to get them to me, though, is through our coaching email. So coaching@gallup.com. Just put StrengthsQuest in the subject, and I'll get those questions to Mark, and we'll do some more of these and answer them for you. But Mark, maybe there's one big misconception about StrengthsQuest, or what is a question that you answer over and over and over and over again that we can kind of get out and have it, one and done once and for all. Anything else that we haven't covered that you might think might be like that?
It'd just be reiterating that we're not using, for instance, I know that some people have asked, they think we're using the old version of StrengthsFinder, and there was an updated version, but it's the version that allows for the production or the generation of the insight report. And obviously that's available on StrengthsQuest. So you have got the most current version of StrengthsFinder within StrengthsQuest. And the book's been around a while, and maybe some of the stories are a bit dated. I'll give you that. But in terms of the the science, and in terms of the instrument that you actually participate in, it is the most current version. And any changes that we would make to StrengthsFinder as we continue to learn and make that tool better along the way, those would be incorporated into the StrengthsQuest site. I would just say that if you're an educator and you're looking at a program or a way to facilitate your students participating in StrengthsFinder and participating in a strengths development program, that StrengthsQuest is the one that provides all the resources appropriate to your situation. And then again, I would also really recommend that you go and check out the online courses that are available. We also, if the situation is suited to it, we'll show up on your campus as well and do programs on campus as well. But there are some really, really nice strengths courses, a whole, a series of strengths courses, and even a certification that you can participate in specific to strengths educators. So check those out under the Strengths Educator tab. There's some really good information there, and some good resources for you to ask any questions.
Yeah, there are indeed. In the future, we'll look at some different applications maybe where this works in, give you some high-level overview of some different scenarios where StrengthsQuest might work for you. We talked about the courses and the certifications. Maybe we can spend a little bit of time going just high level of what they cover and why somebody might want to look at some of those courses. Mark, we might want to think about doing a testimonial of finding maybe some of our best customers, you, me, and them, jump on and get some interviews in. We'd like to hear from you, though. This is kind of the first iteration for StrengthsQuest specifically. And so if you have questions, again, send those coaching@gallup.com. Put StrengthsQuest in the subject. They'll know to get that to us so we can kind of route that back around for it. Mark, is there a better email address if they have specific questions about engagements with StrengthsQuest?
Yeah, it'd be just as easy to go to the StrengthsQuest site and submit a question there. Jim, I had one more.
Yeah.
I know I'm stretching things out a bit here, but
yeah,
I had one more thing that I would add to all of those great prompts that you just gave our listeners, and that would be that if you are a parent and you have specific questions about applying strengths in the context of your own student, we typically are talking about these larger programs and helping whole colleges apply strengths, but I know there's a lot of parents that are thinking, well, I don't think my kid's going to a college that has StrengthsQuest. Yeah, well, that's your problem. You should have picked one that did. But beyond that, we'd love to have your questions around that as well. And I say that I don't have empathy in my top 5, but I feel for you because I'm in the process right now. My daughter is kind of making some final decisions about where she's going to attend college, and I guarantee you, I was very intent on investigating whether or not those schools had strengths-based programs. And so one of the things that I would really be thinking about as a parent that is committed to having your student have that strengths experience is to go back to that GPI report that Jim alluded to earlier. Go to the website, download that, and really be thinking about some of those discoveries that we had in terms of the experiences that students had on their campus, and then thinking about weaving that together with those strengths conversations that you have with your child. We had my daughter got accepted into actually University of Nebraska. She's going to be a Husker, and which is pretty difficult for Dad here because I graduated from Oklahoma State. So, but I do have my master's from the University of Nebraska, so I'm a pseudo Husker. But we were encouraged by the experience that she had when she went down for the recruiting trip, because the first thing the business college mentioned to her was that they approach the students' development based on strengths, and they talked specifically about StrengthsQuest and the experience that students would have. Later, we got an email, a bunch of emails, obviously, but one of the emails that we had was an invitation for my daughter to participate in a learning community. And knowing the information from the Gallup Purdue Index, I'm lighting up because I'm going, this fits exactly within some of those correlations that we saw of alumni that had higher engagement, higher well-being if they participated in a learning community, or if they participated in groups that lasted more than 6 months where they were able to develop relationships. That was a key. And so it's informed me as a parent. And so if you got questions about that or you're thinking about it, we'd love to be in that dialogue with you. And so that'd be one final thing that I'd say before we sign off.
Okay, really good. Well, just a couple reminders. We threw a lot at you, and you might. This is all available. We've recorded it, so you can go back on the video or go back on the audio if you're listening to it that way. Mark, I'm going to actually drop this right in our webcast feed so that it goes out to everybody who listens to Theme Thursday and Call to Coach, because I think it's super important that our coaches who listen to this hear this message as well, mostly because we get a lot of questions around it, and I'm hoping to kind of get everybody educated on StrengthsQuest. But I'll remind everyone to take full advantage of all the resources we talked about. 2 sites, GallupStrengthsCenter.com and also StrengthsQuest.com, available out there if you're thinking about this. Resources are there for you. If you have questions or comments, again, send an email, coaching@gallup.com, put StrengthsQuest in the subject line. I'll alert them to route that to me so we can get that around and get your question answered. Maybe we'll even answer it live right here. And you can also catch all the recorded audio and video of this program, plus all of our webcasts that we do here at Gallup. And if you haven't discovered those yet, you might want to head out to our coaching page, coaching.gallup.com. Go to YouTube and search StrengthsFinder. That will get you there as well. A reminder, we also have a StrengthsFinder app for both iPhone and for Android. And so if you're having trouble remembering your top 5, which a lot of people do, and by the way, only like 80% can remember their top 4, that 5th one always eludes them. And if you want to get out of that, head out to either one of those stores, search StrengthsFinder, download it, log in with the email address that when you took the StrengthsFinder, and boom, there you go. Top 5 are there. and you can always have access to them. What I've been recommending people do, Mark, is take a screenshot of that and then make that their lock screen or make that their background screen, and so they're always looking at their top 5, and that's available for them as well. Mark, I want to thank you for taking a few minutes. We'll do this again, and so we'll remind folks I'll have Mark back on here in the next couple weeks, and we'll spin up another one and have some discussion about some more topics as well as the questions that you have. So get with us, let us know. Mark, thanks for taking the time to be with us today. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. It was great. Thanks, Jim.